Hello, everybody. Welcome to Aquarian Pearls, Pearls of Wisdom. And super delighted and honored to be with Antoinette Matlins today, who's actually in Cyprus, Greece. I'm in Sydney, Australia. So it's Antoinette's Thanksgiving morning in Cyprus, and it's David's afternoon in Australia. And Antoinette, welcome to Pearls of Wisdom. So good to be with you.
I'm delighted to be here. As you know, any conversation that involves pearls is one I'd like to be part of. So
fantastic. Can you tell us where you grew up and studied, and then how you got into the jewelry business? Well, I know you're from a jewelry line, but where you grew up and went to school and college, and what happened next?
I was born lucky to a father, Antonio Bonanno, who was described as the father of modern practical gemology. So from the time I was weenie, I went gold panning, because in the area of Washington where I was born, at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, where the presidents go, that was my claim to fame as a child. So in fact, I actually met President Eisenhower as he was being released from the hospital, and they changed the exits, and all of the reporters start going on the street. And this one man who was standing next to me said, "Little girl, you're going the wrong way." I said, "No, I know a shortcut." So he followed me, and we just walked out the door when cameras started going off, and we turned around, and there he was, President Eisenhower. And I had a 333.3 carat quartz diamond, quote unquote, Herkimer diamond, huge thing that actually had been cut. There were two. One was given to my father. The cutter was Johnson Kankis, a very well-known name today, but he had been one of my father's students, and he was also a fabulous lapidary. So he cut these two huge, faceted Herkimer diamonds, quote unquote, that aren't diamond at all, of course, it's just quartz. But I had worked to be able to give this as a gift to the president. And wow. So I turned around, and I hadn't even taken it out of this giant parcel paper. Just said, "Oh, President Eisenhower, it's me, Antoinette Bonanno," because I'd been writing to him ever since he'd been in office. And of course, I got form letters with the stamped signature, but my father and mother never told me they were form letters with stamped signatures. And I just assumed he would know my name. I'd been writing for him. So, "It's me, Antoinette Bonanno, and I have a gift for you." I was like 8 years old, maybe I was 9. I mean, I was little, but I've never forgotten it. And the interesting thing was, President Eisenhower, had me put in one of the Secret Service cars to drive me home. And we're talking, I'm telling you, I'm 8 or 9. I won't tell you what my age is exactly now, but let me tell you, I am on the closer side of 100 after 75. Okay, so I've lived over 3/4 of a century now. So we're talking a long time ago. There was a way to talk to Mamie Eisenhower at the White House from the car. I mean, I was like, oh my God, it was amazing. It must have been some kind of a walkie-talkie system, but because they certainly didn't have cell phones and car phones back then, but I got to speak to Mamie too. So that was my, and then I made the newsreels. So I was kind of meant to way or another. So I'd go gold panning. I would help my father out at the various gem and lapidary meetings and the Gem Society meetings and all of this kind of stuff, and go to the gem shows with him, and grew up helping him around the office. And every science project, of course, was on something related to the gem world. I remember in junior high school, I made my own dichroscope. So, with a tin can. And I mean, I learned words. And in fact, I remember when Dad said we were going to build our own dichroscope, I couldn't. And throughout my life, when I'm teaching simple gem identification techniques, like to jewelers who've never had a technical or science background, but they need to know more about what they're buying and selling, I would say, and now we're going to do the dichroscope, and you just see the glaze. And then I would say, The hardest part of using the dichroscope is remembering what it's called and how to spell the word. But you don't even need to do that. You just need to know how to use it and when to use it and go on. So I grew up, but pearls were my greatest love, even from the time I was a child. My father had, you may have seen it, huge, sort of a turquoisey blue, gold embossed book that was like this thick. I need to get something clicked out of my screen because I'm getting some kind of a meeting. There we go. Oh, now I can see the full screen. One of my first books was called The Book of the Pearl by George Frederick Kunz.
Yes.
Great, huge book.
We love that book. It's so special, isn't it?
Right. And I still have one of the original 1908 editions of it, or The Book of the Pearl. And Dad would read to me when I was little and couldn't read yet. And it was like, for me, from the time I was weaning and throughout my entire life, pearls are, for me, the perfect metaphor for life. Because, think about it. Oyster has to face a challenge, let us say.
Yes.
This parasite or something bores through the shell and lodges in the membrane, and it's not really very comfortable. So let us just describe this as an uncomfortable situation. Okay? Now, how you deal with it is what makes the difference. Just as when we are confronted with something that is uncomfortable or foreign, we have to take some kind of an action. So some mollusks just die. It kills them. Some mollusks create something.
You've temporarily frozen, Antoinette, where you said some mollusks create something, and we've frozen for a minute.
So since I was a little girl, pearls have really drawn me because of the Book of the Pearl and because of my understanding, even from the earliest age, that there was something so special about pearls. A natural pearl is one of those rarest of all the gems, prized by humankind probably long before any other gem. And it is a gem that would never be created without having to overcome a situation.
Adversity.
Adversity is the right word, something uncomfortable. And there's several ways you can handle it. You can just die, as many mollusks do. You can create something, but not something beautiful that you would love to wear or cherish. My father used to call them calcareous concretions, which I think sums up what they are, right? And then there's the beautiful natural pearl. Now, not all of them are perfectly round. Those are the rarest of the rare. Remember, a natural pearl is not formed by inserting a perfectly symmetrical bead of some shape. It is formed because usually a sea parasite has bored
into the actual shell.
Exactly. It bores into the shell and lodges into the membrane, and then the oyster takes action. Some take an action which results in just giving up and dying. Some take an action that creates something, but the something is not beautiful. It's awful. You wouldn't wear it. And how rare it is when, and in reaction to this threatening situation, the mollusk produces something that's beautiful. And it almost doesn't matter what the shape is. if the surface has that beautiful, intense lustrousness and maybe a play of color across the surface at the same time, which we call oriental, we used to call it orient, okay, that combination, and they could be almost any color. They could be white, they could be cream, they could be pink, they could be orange, they could be gray, they could be black, they could be any color depending upon where this mollusk happened to live and the water conditions and the trace elements and all of that kind of stuff. But it could be so beautiful, and it could be an asymmetrical shape, what we call a Baroque pearl, and they can be all kinds of shapes, and some of them are kind of funny, and some of them kind of remind you of a heart, or a chicken, or a bird in flight, or so many things.
And didn't your namesake Marie Antoinette's big Baroque natural pearl sell in the auction a couple of years ago for
I was going to say, I mentioned to a few of my friends, if anyone wanted to give me a gift, I would really love and appreciate. Nobody came through, what can I say? But it was really, it's a metaphor for life. Think about our own lives when we have to face adversity. The difference in what results are the actions we take. And every time, my engagement ring, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a natural pearl.
Yes.
Yes, it's a pearl flanked on either side by an old cut diamond. The diamonds are just there, but the pearl, I wear it every day. I have been wearing it every day for over 40 years. There isn't even a scratch on it because I don't toss it carelessly in my jewelry box where it might get scratched by something harder. If I put it in my jewelry box, I always wrap a tissue around it to protect it from being scratched, but it's durable. Pearls are one of the most durable of all the gems. Most people think because nacre is soft and can scratch, that it's not wearable. Pearls are incredibly wearable.
Stronger than concrete, aren't they?
You know, I mean, I remember I was at a gemological event and they announced something that made me really happy. And all of us stand up, I am clapping. And all of a sudden I noticed this arc off to the left. And it was in the early days of this organization. And this conference was in a school gym, which had what we call cinder block walls, not beautiful, walls that have plaster. Sure. No, cinder blocks. This one man realizes something's flying through the air. He jumps up and misses, but he keeps his eye on it. It hits the concrete wall, bounces to the cement floor, rolls to the front of the auditorium, and lo and behold, not even a scratch. Now, if somebody had stepped on it and pushed it into the concrete, it wouldn't have been such a good thing because that would have scratched it badly. But it has, because it wasn't drilled, when it was set in this ring in the antique periods, I guess the glue finally dried out. You can be sure I check this ring, my pearl all the time. But it reminds me every single day, particularly days when I'm having a bad day. And I'll bring my hands up and I'll look down, and there is the pearl.
Antoinette, you just froze again. We're at the bit where you're looking down at your hands, and there is the pearl. Okay. You look down at your pearl.
I look down at my pearl, and the pearl reminds me, what am I going to do about this situation? Because it is the actions I take that will decide whether I create anything at all, and if I do, whether those actions will result in something beautiful or something ugly. And think about life. How many people make a wrong choice in terms of how they're going to respond to something? And if you just had a daily reminder that said, think about your actions and make them something good, something that will result in something perhaps more beautiful, or create something that would never have been created were it not for having to overcome this adversity or this challenge in some way. So that's why I say the pearl, more than any other gem, is a metaphor for life. And mine reminds me every day that it's up to me and my.
Yes. No, I'm with you. I'm with you 100% on that in every way. I have a dear friend. She writes books too. I'm going to ask you about writing books in just a second. She's the author Carolyn Mace, and she came with me to the Las Vegas Jewelry Fair, and she was so excited. I said we have to be a bit low key, but when she got into the first jewelry room, she was like screaming with happiness. Oh my God, the gems! And she felt all their vibrations and was absolutely amazed.
Also, you have to understand, I want to correct something for everybody out there who thinks diamond is the engagement ring gem, that diamonds are the symbol of your life's together. Forget it. That's modern history. The pearl, I'm going to say it over and over again, was the first gem ever connected to love and marriage. In the 3,500-year-old Hindu Rig Veda, there is the story of how Krishna, the preserver of life, descends into the depths of the sea to bring forth a pearl to bestow upon his daughter on her wedding day.
Beautiful.
Given in love and connected absolutely directly to marriage. Now, we can all speculate on the symbolism of that between a father and his daughter who has just gotten married. When you think that a pearl comes from water, the life-giving element, from a living creature, et cetera, personally, I think it was to ensure the continuity of life and his offspring. But
clever Krishna.
Right. Well, this I don't know was Harry, but it was Krishna. But
and Krishna, India has that amazing love of pearls throughout the Maharajas and throughout antiquity, and all those pictures of Krishna and his gopis with the pearls. And yeah, it's a huge, and we are our favorite Indian friends in the business who we do so much business with.
It literally, the story dates over 3,500 years ago.
Yes.
All right. Over 3,500 years ago, ancient peoples understood, those particularly of the Hindu faith, India, wherever, they understood the connectedness between pearls and love and marriage. It is the oldest gem directly associated to love and marriage, not diamonds. Diamonds were the symbol of power and strength. That's why Roman generals would carry them into battle. And it was not until the 15th century that diamonds became identified with love and marriage by those wealthy enough to be able to afford them, because they were not for the common man. They were incredibly rare also. And very often, because you couldn't cut them at that time, mounted in their crystal shape, which looks like two pyramids put together, a perfect octahedral diamond. It's like two pyramids put together, top and bottom. But in terms of love, there was no association to diamonds and love until much, much later. The association was to power. And I have no problem with that. I like diamonds too. So I think the perfect combination are diamonds and pearls in an engagement ring. But the natural pearl and fine cultured pearls, let's move into cultured pearls, because cultured pearls were an innovation that took many years to actually make happen. There'd been many, many, many attempts. And it was actually an Australian who came up with the way to do it. Mikimoto, who was identified as the creator, no, he was the marketing genius. He understood how important that patent. And why did they want to be able to create pearls? Because the rarest, most coveted, most highly desired gem ever associated with love and marriage were pearls. And we kind of lost that for a long time. But in Roman period, pearls were also highly desired. But only certain people, only certain segments of the population were even permitted to own and wear pearls. I mean, that's how precious and limited they were. And today, being able to make pearls available to more and more people globally is so wonderful. Because if we were restricted to natural pearls only, it would still be something available only to the world's wealthiest and most powerful people. Most of us wouldn't even have a chance to wear beautiful pearls. And while man aids nature in creating them, it is still the mollusk that does the creation. And that's why you have so many variations and differences. And depending on what type of mollusk is used, some mollusks produce more nacre, the pearly, crystallized pearly coating, faster. And some, it's slower because the water's much colder and but the conditions under which they form and the time they actually spend inside the mollusk, so you get the thickest buildup of pearl around whatever was started, is the kind of thing that is entirely controlled by the mollusk, whether it will be beautiful, whether it won't be beautiful, whether it will be intensely lustrous, whether it won't be. Periods take a very long time and they are very, very expensive. And people today will say to me, yes, but a really fine strand of pearls that I would want, South Sea pearls or, Tahitian pearls. I like black pearls. I like the big white ones. Who can afford those? And then I point out, if the only option you had in pearls were natural pearls, none of us could afford them.
So true.
They may be expensive, relatively speaking. And the finer the pearl, the more difficult. The percentage of any pearl harvest is extremely small in terms of what can be used in the jewelry industry. So the rarer the shape, and round, an absolutely perfectly round shape is still the dream, because nature has a hard time making it perfectly round. The oyster does move, rough seas, they can get sick also. Just a subtle change in water temperature can affect the health of the mollusk. All these things are going on. So when you find a really fine strand of pearls, and I apologize for not wearing them today, but I'm traveling.
You're on the
and
road.
My pearls are inexpensive. And this is a terrible thing to point out, but a number of years ago, in a fine small hotel we'd gone to every year for years for the International Book Fair, and I had always put my jewelry in a safe deposit box. And I went to ask for the safe deposit box. And they said, no, we now have room safes. Everybody was so excited. And to make a long story short, on the last night of this particular event, when most people, because it was on a Sunday, had cash from selling out all their books as quickly as they could, what did they have with them? Cash. That night during dinner, thieves broke into multiple rooms in the hotel, opened the safe, took out the contents of the safe, and guess whose stuff was among them?
Oh la la.
It was horrible, because things my mother had given me and my father and my husband gone in a split second. So I never travel with fine jewelry, which is why I'm not wearing my beautiful pearls for this interview. If we were back home, I'd be bedecked in my favorite, most gorgeous pearls. I never leave home without my ring, and it never leaves my hand when I'm traveling. But it's the kind of thing, they call them safes in the room. The most unsafe place for anyone to put fine jewelry is a room safe. There are ways people can get in and figure out your code, whether it's a key and code, or they have their ways. And I'm not going to explain how it was done in my case, because I don't want to give anybody any ideas, not who might be listening to this, but if you're traveling with fine or prized or cherished jewelry, don't put it in a room safe. Go to the front desk and ask that they put it in. If they don't have a safe deposit box anymore, then see if they will put it in their main safe. Put it in a sealed envelope and just leave it there until you leave, or if you have some special occasion for which you want to wear it. But a room safe is very...
Such wise advice. Antoinette, you've slightly frozen again. We have some internet issues, my dear. But you've traveled all over the world, and I first met you in Pearls '95, I think it was, when we all went to Hawaii about 26 years ago.
Yes, I was going to say, well,
Salvador Rafael was there, and Nick Pasquale, and so many people.
Pasquale, Asael, it was the most amazing conference, and you're probably right, because I remember I brought my daughter and my first granddaughter there. I mean, they weren't at the conference, obviously, but I remember the trip taking them there. And it was also to celebrate my granddaughter's first birthday. So it was, and she's now a mother and has given me my first great grandchild. So it was a long time ago.
Oh my gosh. And can I read in your Pearl book, you dedicated to your daughter Dawn and your granddaughter Bryn, and you wrote,
yes.
Like the finest of pearls, may your spirits radiate from within and shine forth with a soft glow. May they reflect an inner quality and beauty that transcends the surface and stands the test of time. And you've traveled the entire world. You know, I in my life, I started off in Idar Oberstein, then I went to Tokyo, been to Australia, and we all love my favorite place in the world as a young man was Kashmir. And I know you went to Kashmir, I went to Srinagar. And you did 15 years of cruising. You wrote the definitive guide to buying pearls.
Oh, that was the best.
And jewelry.
The best period.
Rings. And so in your life, you've had an extraordinarily gifted life, as you said at the open of the interview. But could you tell us some of the more memorable people you've met? I mean, you've met them all, the Cartiers and all the people in our beautiful jewelry business, but does any single place or event or people really stand out? Or you've met so many?
I'm going to start with recent history. I went to Bahrain for the first time about a year and a half ago. I don't remember the exact date. One thing people who know me know is I have zero sense of time. I'm really good about lots of things, but I have no sense of time. So, but we were in Bahrain for the first time, and I was supposed to go diving with one of the pearl divers because Bahrain has been the major source of natural pearls in the world for thousands of years. And the Indian Maharaja, I mean, they would come, to Bahrain, the Bahrainian people would go to these places with their natural pearls. And so here I am for the first time in my life in Bahrain. I couldn't wait to go diving. And unfortunately, they had one of the hottest weeks in Bahrainian history. And one of the divers actually almost died from heat stroke. He collapsed. So they decided they weren't taking me diving because even though the water wasn't that hot, it was much warmer than it had.
And I bet compared to your state of Vermont, that was hot.
Oh, it broke my heart. However, they did provide me with about 4 bushels of oysters to open. Now, there's a special technique to opening the oyster because you don't want to damage the
You've slightly frozen again. You're just saying you don't want to damage the pearl itself when you're opening the oyster.
So you don't want to damage the pearl when you're trying to get the shell open. So there are tricks, but I opened bushels of, I spent most of the day opening oysters. I perfected the technique of opening the oyster. Could we stop for 1 minute and I can actually show you what I found in all of those bushels?
Yes, we can wait because we don't stop. We just keep going. But if you wanted to get it, by all means, or we'll take a photograph after.
Or I could do it at the very end, whatever.
Yes.
But I will show you shortly what I found in all of those bushels. And I don't want you to laugh. You have to promise you won't laugh or I won't show you.
I promise, Antoinette.
All right. One of them was not as weeny as all the others, but I provided a new definition of seed pearl. Some of mine make seed pearls look giant, but I found them, the beginnings of these little natural pearls. I was so thrilled with what I found, but I'm going back this coming January. I think it's January, February 2022. There's going to be a major natural pearls, international pearl exhibition. I hope to see you there.
Is Ken Scarrett living there and running the laboratory?
He's no longer living there, but he'll probably be back for the exhibition. I'm not really sure where Ken is now, but I did not see him because there was a new director who came into the lab just before he did, but he had been there.
Yes.
And
he's a great friend of the natural pearl business, of course.
Yes, of course. And I'm sure he can his time in Bahrain also. It was a wonderful place. But other places, of course, it was meeting the CEO of Cartier in New York in an elevator. Two men got on the same elevator I got on, and we're going up the elevator. And this one man, I can see he's opening a parcel paper, the papers you put gemstones in and fine pearls. Okay. And because I was raised by my father, I knew it was a parcel paper, and I blurted out, "Oh, that's a red diamond crystal." And instantly, and the guy said to me, "That's ridiculous. Diamonds." I said, "Oh, don't try that with me. I don't know who you are and you don't know who I am, but I know that diamonds do, and they come in every color in the rainbow. And that's a diamond crystal. And I know one when I see one." At which point they stopped the elevator and got off my floor came up. So I got off, they got off the elevator with me. They wanted to know more about how I knew. So I explained about the adamantine luster and the shape of the crystal, and they actually cut the rough. They were taking it to a cutter, but that's when I met Fred Montesinos, who was the CEO at Cartier at the time. The other guy was one of the cutter people who were going to be involved in cutting. And Fred and I became really good friends for a number of years. He unfortunately died early from massive heart attack while leaving Cartier, but he was wonderful. And Sal Asael, as in Asael pearls, the first one to market Black pearls in the United States. He recognized there was a market for these and he fell in love with them. And Asael and I were really great friends. And you met him at the Pearl event, which was the last one that was dedicated to pearls.
And I was lucky enough to take over his office with Nick Paspaley. And so we opened Asael Paspaley together, and Sal took me to lunch every Friday in the French restaurant. I was in New York, and I maybe only said 5 words in the whole lunch, but it was amazing. He was a great friend of my dad, and so but it was fabulous. He was the greatest showman, I think, of our business.
Showman sums it up. Sal Asael, when he died, I went to the funeral and I cried my eyes out because he was really a one of a kind. And he
was like an American Mr. Mikimoto, the way he put pearls on the map, and he brought them to life.
He brought them to life, and he recognized their specialness, and he understood how few, they can talk about culturing, and all these people talk about, well, yeah, everybody's culturing. You can culture pearls, and then you can culture pearls, and you can harvest them prematurely, or you can leave them in. You've got to kind of figure out exactly when the harvest should take place, because it is expensive. It's very expensive. As I said, a degree of temperature difference in the water can affect what is on the outermost surface of the pearl. So
and true, and the amount people like Robert Wan and Mr. Paspaley and Mr. Branelec spent on making
Robert Wan was another one who was amazing. Yeah, I loved Robert Wan.
And there's that amazing story with Salvador in your book, how he found an amazing pearl within a pearl when he peeled it. Yes. And he said it's such a metaphor for life. If you don't judge a book by its cover and look inside the person, there's a lot going on inside that we don't see always at first.
Exactly. And I mean, in fact, he was one of the few people left historically who knew how to peel pearls. Yes. And there's still a woman and her family in the United States who learned from their father, also like a father to me, John Latendresse, the father of American culture.
Yes, yes. He was a great gentleman. And he came to the conference. Yes, and he was a Marine, wasn't he, as well? Yeah.
Exactly. A major,
his lovely daughter.
His daughters are lovely, very lovely. And Gina, who runs the company today, is one of my best friends. She's like extended family. Yes. But John Latendresse was there, and he took me to visit the farm. And there had been torrential rains, and it was summer. And I'm in a pair of black jeans and a shirt, and we go to the farm. He's bringing up some things to show me. And then we get back in the boat to go, because we went to an island out in the lake where they were growing the oysters or the mollusks, right. And so we're in the boat coming back. He's wearing light blue jeans. I'm wearing black blue jeans, right? And I look at him, oh, John, there's a tick. Where? Oh my God, John, there's another tick. Oh my God, John, there are ticks all over you. And then I look at my own pants, and they're black, and you can't see any of the ticks on my, and suddenly it's like, oh my God. When I got to my hotel room, I removed 32 ticks.
Whoa.
John's wife removed about 45 from him. And mine were virtually all on the clothing. There were a couple on my skin, but they weren't deeply embedded yet, so I could remove them. But I had never been afraid of anything like ticks. From that moment, it is like, and when I get together with Gina, she'll say, you want to come? Oh, no, you're concerned about the ticks, right? But never seen anything like it. But my one really exciting time with the American freshwater pearl production was slightly marred, because apparently what had happened is, in the flooding, all those ticks rose to the surface. And then when the waters receded, they just dropped on the island we spent all those hours on. And found fresh meat. What can I say? John and I showed up. But that was one of the horrible experiences, but it was a memorable one. And John Latendresse was like my second dad, and Gina's like a sister. So that was American freshwater pearls. And then I went diving when the Mexican production began, because in Mexico used to be one of the major, well, it's still a source of natural pearls. The occasional, the diver pulls up a oyster and there's a pearl in it, but they're incredibly rare. They tend to be the rainbow lipped oyster, which gives those blacks with the colors across the surface that are particularly the old natural pearls, but the cultured pearls. So these two college students were out collecting spat from the Gulf of Mexico, not the Gulf, well, the Sea of Cortez, technically. And sterna, the name of the particular mollusk that had produced those pearls that went to royalty in Europe from the 15th, 16th, 17th century. So they wiped them out. They were believed to be an extinct species. And so here are these two college students at the college there studying marine biology who go to collect spat, and they find Proteria sterna, bow-lipped, the babies. So they decide they'll start raising them. So they start raising them. So then they bring in some people from another pearl producing country. I won't mention which, because to this day, I don't know whether they deliberately told them they couldn't culture that particular species because they were too strong and you would kill them trying to open them. And you could never get them large enough to have a market for them, because by the time they get large, you'd never be able to open the shell. So these two young men them, and then they decided they wanted to try culturing by putting an implant, a nucleus, see if they could actually grow pearls. Well, it was awfully difficult until we need to sedate them. And the other one said, what do you mean sedate? He said, let's try putting a little alcohol in the water. And the other one said, alcohol? He said, no, not that kind of alcohol, the kind you drink. Let's see if we put some alcohol, as in tequila, whatever they use, maybe they'll relax. They did.
The world's first alcoholic oysters.
The little guy went over them and go, so,
oh my gosh.
You know, need is the mother of invention. They really thought if they could figure a way to open them, to implant the nucleus and to open them to remove the pearl, they could have something really special. And they did. And it's one of the few sources of cultured pearls that have really, really, really thick nacre in any way. And speaking of thick nacre reminds me of something else. I have to say it because I don't know who's watching, but I have gone into wholesale districts around the world and to various suppliers, quote, to the public as well as to the trade. Wholesale prices to the public. And where they have pearls, there are no universal grading systems yet for pearls. There are certain grading systems that knowledgeable people know are fairly reliable, but nothing that's universally accepted. I have found being sold as cultured pearls, and they always put them on sale for graduation, college graduation periods and Mother's Day. They, $2,000 necklace dropped to $250. No, it wasn't a $2,000 necklace. It was dropped to $250. They're $100 per strand pearls, marked up 2.5 times because they're garbage. Now, what do I mean by garbage? My father would never use the word garbage in a conversation about gems. He would have said garbage. But the point is, you know how thick the nacre was? A thick nacre, really thick, today is 0.3 to 0.5 millimeters on each side. Okay, that's thick and that's durable. Now, again, let me say it, 0.3 to 0.5. These pearls had a nacre thickness of 0.005. In other words, less thick than a dollar bill or a paper currency.
Not even $10.
If you look, not even, if you look at the drill holes, if they're drilled, you can't even see the line of demarcation. I mean, frequently you'll see something like peeling off right below the knot if they're knotted. Usually they're not. You can see something looks like it's peeling. And I remember saying to one of the salespeople, "What's that peeling?" And she said, "Oh, that's not peeling. It's just a little piece of the glue. Here, let me flip it off for you." So then I decided to take this a little further, and I started buying up strands at various retailers selling these super cheap, not non-pearl pearls. And then I took them back, a couple of months later. And I said, "I've just noticed this with my necklace. I don't understand it." And the salesman, "Just a moment, let me check with them." He comes back and says, "My dear, it's the acid in your skin. You shouldn't wear pearls." The acid in my skin was eating the nacre. No, they didn't have enough nacre. They'd already started cracking at the drill holes and peeling away. What you were seeing was that super thin layer was actually starting to come off because those won't stand.
It's so important to buy bright, lustrous, high quality pearls, isn't it? And you've helped the industry so much by writing the books and preaching about the ethics, and you've written for pearls and diamonds and all sorts of jewelry. Yes,
it prompted my writing of the pearl, my book, the Pearl Book,
the guide, the definitive buying guide.
Of course, this was the book of the pearl. Mine was the Pearl Book, but
that's what the consumers absolutely need to. And in your book, we must give it a plug. All your books, but you actually tell the consumer when going to a jewelry store what to look for in a good, reputable jewelry store, what to ask,
and what to look out for, and definitely knowing what questions to ask and what to get in writing is the most important thing consumers need to know. Even if they just, take a picture with their smartphone of the questions to ask when buying pearls, or the questions to ask when buying diamonds or colored gems, and what to get in writing, and then do it at the counter.
Linda, you've frozen again. I'm sorry, but what we're going to do is we're going to put into the guide that goes with this interview how to buy your books and a description of the books you've written definitively in your biography too. And we've run out of time, but I have to ask you one last question, which is, in a nutshell, if you were speaking to your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, our children who were considering coming into the jewelry business as opposed to going and selling Bitcoin or something, what would you say to people contemplating the coming into the jewelry business? This is our wrap-up question for you.
Okay, in Tucson, there are hundreds of lectures, workshops, seminars given. The first thing you want to do is take a workshop on gem identification techniques. In fact, I'm thinking of doing my own this coming year in Tucson because they don't allocate enough time for me to do what I need to do. So I'm thinking of doing an all-day thing and limiting the number of people so we can get into it. But go to take some lectures or workshops that give you some idea of what's involved in identifying or the tools you could use that could help you, because you have to know what you're looking for with the tools. That takes experience. But if you have fun in the workshop and you find you're drawn to it, then put the money into a gemological curriculum, whether it's GIA or the GEM-A or SSA. There are many gem laboratories around the world now that offer courses. Take serious courses, get a degree, because you don't want to be like the consumer who buys based on trust from a particular person. We could spend another, half hour, we could spend hours on tricks the trade encounters from other people in the trade at the major shows. Lack of personal knowledge and skill, knowing what questions to ask, knowing how to check them out after the purchase, and knowing you can find them tomorrow, all critical parts of the equation. But if you love it, like in my workshops, I get letters all the time from people who say, I had such fun. I decided to go to GIA. 2 years later, I got my GG. So, and then there are those who you can tell by looking at them, it's like, not what they'd never make it as a gemologist. A gemologist is a detective. Every gem, the moment you look at it with your eye alone, you may have ideas as to what it might be, but until you know how to check it yourself, how to use the tools and what those tools are going to show you gem by gem, you don't know. So that whatever you buy and sell, or buy and put into a beautiful creation of your own to sell, that it is what you're telling the buyer it is, because one error and your reputation is mud, particularly today with social media and people go online and blab it to the world. You have to be knowledgeable. And Gem Identification Made Easy, for those people who think it's fun in Tucson, that's the book that makes it easier. I've never liked the title of that book, Gem Identification Made Easier, but at least it tells you how to use the equipment and what to look for gem by gem. Pictures of all the charts and take them with you, use them.
Thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest, and you're full of life and vitality and enthusiasm and warmth and beauty. And you're everything our jewelry business is. So I sincerely thank you on behalf of all our audience, and our audience can read all your books, which we'll post and chat. So much love to you, and thanks. And I can't wait to meet up again in real life.
I hope to see you in Tucson one of these days. So, ciao.